Hello guys, welcome to another Arcane Arcane concept video. I hope you guys are having an amazing week. I am on my side here and I have a lot of really great news coming out in terms of some of the stuff that I previously talked in all the video in regards to the indicator that I've been working on. That's actually pretty much live right now and it's in beta testing phase. At this point, we have a few users utilizing it and giving us some feedback. But those are some of the news I have going on in the background. Amazing stuff. So, and we're going to touch on briefly on that in this video. But before I go into all those exciting stuff, let's focus on today's video, which is going to revolve around Arcane hourly cycle. Okay, this is going to be a very powerful concept because I utilize this to be able to understand, how long or what's the optimal time that some of the trade that I will take would typically deliver. Okay, so that two type of cycle that I'm going to be describing in this video, one is going to be a macro hourly cycle and one is going to be an intra hourly cycle. I know it sounds a little bit like Chinese or some random language I'm describing right now, but as I go through each of these, it's going to make a lot of sense. And I want you to even think about some of your trade that you have taken in the past. As I describe each of these cycle, you might see some parallel as to maybe why some of the trade that you've taken in the past may have worked in your favor, especially those that held more than 15, 20 minutes, and why some did not, right? With that said, let's go and dive into the first section. All right, perfect. So this is going to be the first topic for this section, the arcane hourly cycle. So we are going to have two main type of cycle that I primarily utilize. The first one is going to be the macro hourly cycle. So the macro hourly cycle is kind of like zooming out, right? You're looking from a bird eye view, and it really stipulate here that every hour have their own opening. So one of the more predominant hourly open, I would say the period of time when you can start seeing real move for each hourly period of time is going to be at the 30s, right? Precisely the 31s to the next 30 of the next hour. So that's pretty much the cycle of that hour. The reason why that's important is because, let's say, for example, if you get an entry confirmation within this hourly cycle right here, 31 to the next 30 of the next hour. So, for example, 9:31 to 10:30 or 10:31 to 11:30, ideally, the retest cycle for that hourly cycle with the next windows that I'm going to be describing here is going to be 31 to 41 of the next cycle, or it could also fall into 49 to 17 of the next cycle. So what I mean by that is that, let's say you have an entry that delivers like market structure shift or an IFG reversal, something of that sort, between, let's say, 10:31 to 11:30. That means that if you're looking for a retest of that PD area, right? If your objective has not been reached yet, ideally, you want the retest, if it's going to be a strong retest, to happen in this retest window that I have here. This retest window right here. This is where you want to see the retest. So if you have an entry in a previous hourly cycle, ideally, if past goes for your target and fails to reach it, you simply have to look at the next hourly cycle and then look specifically in these windows. And this will give you some of the best retests for that continuation and distribution because you're implementing macro hourly cycle to be able to determine where it is most likely for pass the pullback and give me a clean contribution to my draw if that draw has yet to be reached, right? So these are going to be the best cycle window to trade and then trade your retest, right? For example, my early breaker retest, if this looks familiar, if you have been watching some of my video, this definitely should look familiar to you because my early breaker retest follows this cycle, right? 731, right? 731 to all the way up until 8:30 and then 8:31 to 9:30 are like the early windows, right? That I can typically look for some type of breaker, arcane breaker, PD area to be formed. Now, between 9:31 to 9:41, that's the first window that you guys will see how described in the early breaker retest. And then the next window that I also describe is 9:49 to 10:17. That's the final window right there. And this will be how I would trade this cycle, right? It doesn't necessarily stop at 9:30 and then, 8:30, 7:30. That's the early windows for the entries, but you could essentially continuously look throughout the entire day, the next window to form, and then the following retest window to essentially look for the retest, and that would deliver still. Now, the next one is going to be our intra-hourly cycle. This can be very powerful right here. So this going to overlap with concept that you guys are already familiar with, like macros, right? 50-10s, if you guys are not familiar with 50-10s, people that are trading ICT are very, very familiar with 50-10s. Another window that is very, very popular, in my personal opinion, many people love that window, or sometimes they trade that window, is going to be 2040. Now, in my personal opinion, 2040 and 50-10s are very powerful windows. If you simply pay attention to what 2040 does, and then 50-10s, it's probably going to accelerate your speed of learning in this industry, because if you consistently come in at the open of the market, 8:30 open or 7:30 open, you observe how 7:20 to 7:40 deliver, 8:20 to 8:40 delivers, and then 9:20 to 9:40 deliver, and how it interacts with the 50-10s of every single window of that hour afterwards. So like 7:20 to 7:40, how does it interact with 7:50 to 8:10? If you look at 8:20 to 8:40, pay attention to how 850 to 910 operate with that. If you're looking at a 920 to 940, look at how 950 to 1010 interconnect with that. And then you will notice that a lot of the time, how these are connected is very simple. So I'm going to give you an example how you can implement this and how it can be practical. Let's say if you have a range, right? That range, let's say lows right here, begins in that 2040 window, right? 20 to 40 window. If you are familiar with my concept of EMD, right? Expansion, manipulation, and then distribution. If you have an expansion, right? The expansion phase that begins with a 2040 window right here, usually what you will see is that once we start having the pullback, right? It will be inside of this window right here, meaning that the manipulation, right? Could be this window right here, right there. Or it could also be this window right here, right? But I'm going to tell you this, most of the time, it is going to be this window and then crept into this window a little bit. And then what you're going to see is that my volume candle for 59 to 1 to 01 will deliver for the VIG to continue to the top of this range. Or you can sometimes see 14 to 15 to deliver for that VIG. If you're not familiar with VIG are, please go ahead and check out a video on my channel that talked about VIG. That will give you a breakdown. I'll see if I can link that video on the description of this video, and then that will help you find that really ASAP. What you're looking for essentially is a continuation, right, of 50% of this range right here, this 2040 range, because that's how they will interconnect. So if 2040 essentially created the expansion right here, 41 to 49 will create the manipulation right here, and then 50-10s right here, 50-10 will create the continuation right here. So that's kind of how they're connected. If you have a day where you have volatility, right? 2040, like 920 to 940 can expand, 41 to 49 can manipulate, and then 50-10s can create that next distribution. That's why a lot of the time you will see ICT trader would say the macro delivered this massive move. This will be one of the pattern that you can see. 50-10, which is a very popular macro within ICT, deliver that continuation. That is essentially how I tie to the way I trade my concept. As you know, I try to keep things very simple, make it so that people can essentially take my concept and have applicability and practicality attached to that. So if you want to trade with this in the back of your mind, just kind of think of it like that. So these are more dynamic, I would say, than the macro hourly cycles. That's a little bit of how you would utilize it in the actual trading environment. There are many ways to utilize the hourly cycle. I'm going to show you another way to utilize it. One of the trade that was taken 2-3 days ago, or last week, I should say, and how I manage this position with one of the pattern that I recognize, understanding how each hourly cycle are really supposed to be delivering. So we're going to go into the chart and I'm going to show you how this played out. So as you can see, this is an entry that came in at 735 between the hourly cycle of 731 to 830, right? And by the way, this is not a manual entry. This is an entry by my indicator. And as you can see, this is also showing you guys the type of entry, which is SVB. This is an entry type for my model. The direction, which is sell, it gives you the entry level, right? It also gives you the contract amount based on how much you have set as your risk in your settings. So in my settings right here, I have set my maximum, let me see here, my maximum risk at $500. So this position is auto-calculated and giving me the contract amount for that position specifically. Now I have made it a little bit higher risk. So if I adjust it to be the risk based on the swing, is going to be actually more accurate very soon. Like now it's actually the more accurate. So the way it was before was actually the stop loss at behind the box. So it will actually make it so that my risk is a little bit more tighter, I would say. There's many ways to play around with risk and stuff. So I just want to show you that. Now, this was an entry at 735, so it was essentially within this first hourly cycle, 730. So 730 essentially started right here, and then the next hourly cycle is going to be at 830. And I think this day we had news. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe we had some type of news. So if this begins delivering, right? This is an example how you can utilize the macro hourly cycle. So if you have a move that begins delivering, and this is what I'm paying attention all the time, and the reason why I love to utilize 30 as the open of the hourly cycle, it is because that's when volatility kick in around opens of the market. So like 730 is an open, 8:30 is an open, 9:30 is an open, even 10:30 is an open. And obviously you guys know 1:30 is an open. Typically, those are going to be the period of time when you're going to see volatility kick in. So you got to pay attention to those specific windows. Now, going back to what I was saying, if you have an entry earlier on here, but we fail to grab our target, because I'm looking at this level right here as a potential target, right? And then instead, we start pulling back closer to 8:30. There's two things that can happen here when we come to 8:30. 8:30 can pull back into my PDA right here, some of the PDA that I have here, or maybe one that's created a new here, and essentially use the volatility of this open or the first few retest window that I mentioned before to deliver to a final target before we reverse, right? That's one of the things that you can see happen. Or you could simply just manipulate to maybe some of the level of liquidity that create internally here and then push us higher. But if you have a move that's already confirmed from the previous hourly cycle, I still want to see like a retest failure or something of that sort, or key level to fail to really tell me that we're going to be reversing. Otherwise, I'm still seeking the same direction, not necessarily anything that goes in the opposite direction. So let's see. Let's see what price does. So we play around here, and then let's go ahead and get close to 8:30. So it dynamically exit here. This is where it will exit because my model, my system, the way I manage everything, it does this automatically, right? It will close it within a few minutes of the 8:30, the next open. But dynamically, if you're managing a trade manually, you can essentially look for the dynamic exit based on the rule that I mentioned. So let's see what happened here at 8:30. So 8:30 right here, look at what we do here. This key zone right here, this bearish key zone, right? My auto indicator drawn. See how we respected that, right? At what time? 8:30 and 8:31 right here. Rejected off that zone as well. And then we flushing, right? So someone could have held that position here and then see what would have happened, which is kind of risky if you have news. But if you don't have any news, this is perfectly fine to do. I think this would have been the perfect trade to hold here. And then as you can see, we had another bearish zone that was created here. Price came back and then we tested it at what time? 8:34. 8:34 was a candle that rejected here after we pulled back and respected that zone. So, and eventually delivered to the final target within a few minutes of the open. And that's what I meant by that, right? So if you have an entry in the previous hourly cycle, the next hourly cycle retest window, pay attention to those retest window, right? And look at PD area, look at key zone that's created along the distribution before we get to our final target. Because right here, this would have been our final target to the sell side. What's to be told? Like really, I would even put like 25,000 right here. This measures psychological level because it is so close to standard deviation 4 target. So it's obvious that's going to be our final target right here, this 25,000. It's also a 3-0 number, so whole number with 3-0. So it's a very strong number. So it's a strong chance that we're actually going to be delivering to this level. That's essentially how I would trade this, right? I would pay attention to what the first few minutes of the next hourly open, because that's a retest cycle of that next hourly cycle would do. And then I'll watch and carefully analyze what that retest window would essentially do. And if it follows and respect the PD area in that same distribution, I would hold it until those levels get violated. Now, if this right here, we validated this and then we closed above here, no longer a good thing, right? If we get a bullish candle close here and then the next candle is a bullish candle, it's most likely going to violate this and then just shoot up straight up. But if it's a bullish candle that close here and then the next candle close bearish and then close below these bearish key levels here that we created, that our indicator called out for us, then you don't have anything to worry about. It's already telling you that, oh, it's good to go, and just trade in the direction that you're supposed to trade. So those are just different ways to utilize it. And now if price had not done anything here of this key level, like let's say around this time between 8:31 and 8:41, then I would have paid attention to like 8:49 to 9:10 right here. This would have been the next window right here. So imagine if you had just like played around, played around, played around, played around. This would have been the next window. I will pay attention to like, oh, I didn't need PD area that we created again, like any bearish zone that we created that we're respecting in this zone. Then that would have given you probably the final confirmation here or invalidation that we're going to be really heading to this sell side and then flush this target. So let's play around and see what happened. Boom. We eventually hit our target. As you can see, this was a nice, beautiful trade. So that's really all for today. I hope now you guys have a clear understanding of what our hourly cycle, how to utilize them, at least one way to utilize them. And if you guys would like more video like this is a little bit more technical and in depth. But I like to do this type of video breaking down in depth and technical. And now that we have our indicator, and I kid you not, I trade with this now completely hands-free without having to come in and mark up my key levels and even call out my trade exactly the way I wanted it to be called. I don't even do any sort of analysis. I just place this on a chart and give me my signal. It has an average win rate for my backtest already of like 70%, give or take, and an average risk to reward for most of the winner anywhere between 2.3 and all the way to like 4.6, 4.7. So it's really, really robust, really, really solid. I really, really enjoy utilizing this. It's still currently in beta, but if you guys would like to have access to this and be part of the early access beta group of people that I'm giving access to, reach out to me on Instagram if there's still slot or spot for early testing for people to have it to test it and so on and so forth. I will let you know. But just reach out to me on Instagram, and if there's still time when this video comes out or whatever, I'll do my best to get you in. And again, thank you for listening up until this point of the video. I hope you guys have an amazing rest of your day, and until next time, stay in profit. Peace.